Good evening and welcome to VI Voices. I'm Emil Henderson III, along with Clint Ferris and Boyd McFarlane. Yoki Hanley has a night off. We are here tonight as we have with us Opal Adisa, who is a local poet and playwright. And she's with us tonight. She's going to sit in with us as we discuss a little bit about what she does, a little bit about that wonderful and awesome play that she had over the weekend entitled Out of Control, a play that highlighted and talked about the issues in regards to domestic violence and how we react to domestic violence and how we play a role in the issues regarding domestic violence. And our very own Boyd McFarland was a star leading role in that play. I know we didn't get a chance to talk about it because he didn't tell us, but we still went in nevertheless to see the play, and I will say he was exceptional. And so we're going to try to make sure that we have an opportunity to fight and get that play out here so a lot more people can see it and see Boyd and see all the other wonderful actors and actresses that were part of that play that brought your words and your vision to life. So, Ms. Adisa, thank you so much for being on VI Voices, and welcome.
I'm very happy to be here.
For those of us who may not know who you are, please let us know a little of who you are, what you're doing, what you do.
Okay, so I am a writer and a playwright, and this is my third year doing a play locally under the auspices of a theater group I started by the name of Moving Women. And the title should not confuse to think that it's only about women. But initially when I did the first play, it was in fact only women. But the objective of Moving Women is to be a socially conscious theater group in the Frederiksted, St. Croix area that works with men and women and children and youth. My goal is to have, to eventually have a summer program, so there would be a summer school for children, and then there would be a youth solo performance where they would write and perform their own work.
Awesome. Now, you said that you are also a writer, and I know that you've done many books, many poems. Tell us a little bit about some of this work that you've done.
Okay. I'm originally from Jamaica, so a lot of my work deals with Jamaica, and I've always been very much aware and very conscious of the culture, bringing the African culture to the rest of the world, looking at the folklore and the traditions. So my first collection, Tamarind and Mango, well actually even before that, Market Woman, was really celebrating strong women that I see around the Caribbean and that I grew up with. And then my other collection, my first major poetry collection, Tamarind and Mango Woman, obviously is dealing with a lot of the fruit and the fauna of the Caribbean. And again, it's looking at both the history, what has happened over the time period, looking at the culture and the way in which we interact and talk about things. So my work is very much steeped in celebrating who we are and culturally promoting our culture to the rest of the world.
Awesome. Well, tell us a little bit of what gave you the idea of Out of Control, and what is Out of Control?
Okay. For a very long time I didn't have a title, and it really kept me from developing the play, because every year I set about writing a new play, and last year it was about cleaning up the beach, pick it up and take it. And this year I teach part-time in California in the fall, and I've had a number of students who have was impacted by domestic violence, and one student in particularly had to drop out because her boyfriend, even though she had a restraining order, was proving to be very challenging. And it had been on my mind because I'd also talked to some other people for whom that had been an experience, and I knew it was an issue that unfortunately didn't seem to be getting any better. And I felt, for me, theater is one of the ways that we in the Caribbean, but everywhere, but particularly in the Caribbean, can really look at social issues. And it provides this public forum for us to talk about these issues in a way that I think is meaningful. So the idea started about last year, and then when I came and I met with people at the Women's Coalition and DVSAC, I said I really wanted to do a play about domestic violence, specifically in St. Croix. And things kind of just happened in that I met a woman whose daughter was killed years ago by her husband. I began to talk to some people for whom this was an issue. I began to look at some data, and So it was churning in my head, and I couldn't think of a title. And it's like, what is this? And I'm telling people I'm writing this play on domestic violence. And then one night it just came that really what it is about is being out of control. That in order for someone to systematically and continuously beat on someone they claim they love, and I'm not doubting that they do, that means they're out of control. You see, and I'm always looking at the way in which pain gets distorted, and anyone who is a batterer or is a victim, and I hate the word, there's a lot of pain that has been internalized, that is sitting there. And so I wanted to show that in multidimensional ways. And I remember when I initially said I wanted to look at, we have a stereotypes. We tend to think domestic violence is poor people, poor black people, And I know from living in California that Marin City, which is one of the most wealthiest area, especially during football, they have the highest incidence of domestic violence.
Wow.
Yeah. Those statistics came out. So I wanted to do something that looks at St. Croix. I didn't want us to point fingers, but I wanted to show that it happens in every sector, in every race, in every sector, in every gender things. Initially, the play went through 3 drafts. So initially there was a gay couple, but I couldn't find 2 gay men who wanted to do it. And so then I changed the role and just had that data in there. And so yes, we're out of control. We're out of control because we cannot reel ourselves in, as one of the actors say in the play. We're out of control because we're in pain, and therefore we project that pain and inflict it. And one of the statistics, domestic violence it becomes cyclical, in that you find that children who witness this, and even though many of them proclaim that they never would, they find themselves repeatedly either being batterers or being victims.
Abused, right.
Right, and so you have to, how do we stop this unless we start to give it some public attention, and we say to people, it's something that you can address. It is something that can be cured. It's an illness. It is an illness, and it can be cured through counseling and through other kinds of methods of working it through. But first you have to accept and admit that you're doing something wrong. And in our culture we kind of condone it. The folklore, the calypsos, a lot of that, it seemed to be okay, and that's something else that I wanted to bring out, that it's not okay.
Wow. That
we need to look at ourselves as we move into the 21st century as a people. How do we want to project ourselves in the world? We talk about St. Croix being paradise. Well, what does that mean if our homes are fraught with all kinds of violence and emotional turmoil?
One of the things that I thought was so important about this play is the fact that one of your couples, right, was where the wife was the batterer and the husband was the one being abused and battered. And I think oftentimes when we talk about domestic violence, we zero in on a male abuser and a female person that's victim or person that's being abused. And we always forget that there's a lot of homes, even right here in the territory in St. Croix, where men are being abused by their significant other who happens to be a woman.
Right.
So it was very good to see that aspect in your play.
Yeah, it was really important for me that got brought out, because in talking to people, and I say to them, well, sometimes men are abused. They're very dismissive of it. Just like in the intermission where people laugh when at that scene, and Kunuma said from DVSAC said, we need to be sensitive about the fact that it's not okay when we see it on stage where a man is doing it, but when it happens to a man, then we kind of laugh it through, and therefore that serves to prevent other men from coming forward, and so we don't really have accurate statistics of how many men are battered, but we know that it happens. Yeah, it occurs, and if not physically, emotionally. So we need to look at that too, because it has the same devastating impact.
Absolutely.
Ms. Adisa, I heard you talk about the victim being in pain. So I'm sure during your research at some point, didn't you realize that the batterer is in pain as well.
Oh, both are. Both are. In order for you to accept it and to continue to justify it, then you have to be in pain. But in order for you to inflict it, you also have to be in pain.
Right.
You see, and that's why for me, in writing the play, I wanted to give a background of these characters, not to justify their action, but
Right,
to say there is something about who they are that has led to this, some kind of thing, some emotional or psychological information that they're not accessing or that they're denying, which then allows them to say it's okay in their mind. It's okay for me to beat my woman or okay for me to beat my mate. You have to be in pain in order
And I
to
think
do
a lot
that.
of people focus on the victim, and naturally so you would focus on the victim, but I think in order for prevention as well, that we should start working
Both.
on the batterer too, you know what I mean, in terms of preventing. We could see what the issues are, the scars in that too.
Right.
Right. And the men's coalition, that's their aim, is to look at the batterers and to get them to, and which is why that, to me, the last two movements are so important,
Right.
is to get the men to sit down and one, acknowledge what they've done, to try to figure out why they've done it, and to stop doing it.
Right.
Because they're hurting themselves as well.
Ms. Adisa, how do you bring this message and make an impact in a community like a predominant Caribbean society that
Machismo.
it's a very we are very machismo, it's a more macho kind of community where men are dominant throughout the Caribbean. How do you bring that message to change cultural norms?
Well, I think first you just bring the message and you get people talking about it.
Like we're doing tonight.
Yeah, I think yes. I personally, when I think about my father and my father's generation and the kinds of things that they would never talk about, I think men in my generation and hopefully even younger are talking about more things than my father would have. So I think, yeah, Caribbean men are very, all of that. But I think there is a movement afoot and there's more sense of give and take. And I think also, historically, we have to look at why are they like that. Part of the reason why they're like that has to do with the whole so-called new world and what they lost in this new voyage, which again is, I don't want to go into the historical antecedent, but, part of our bravado and our thing, and I also think part of our beating of each other has to do with our enslavement that we don't want to address.
That's definitely
So
a
I
factor.
think just by I think more plays need to be written about this subject from many different angles so that we can say, okay, let's look at this. How do we want to move forward?
One of the things that has always kind of gotten into my craw is this men's coalition. Because, as a lawyer, when I would have cases and men would be sent to the men's coalition, it always felt penal in nature. In that we're sentencing you and you must go to the men's coalition for anger management. You go to the men's coalition for this. And as I watched the play, I thought, okay, when women who are battered go to women's coalition, not only do they get, safe havens and stuff, but they get counseling to help them understand why they would be in a relationship where they're being battered. The men go to men's coalition for anger management.
No, but
But right, that's what they usually go there for. And when I say that, if there's an issue with the court or a restraining order, whatever, the courts send you, and in addition to going to men's coalition, they sign off for anger management classes you have to take. So they go there, they do the anger management, they pass it, they come back, and they're good. Without, in my view, ever really dealing with the issue of why you're so angry. It's not so much that you're going for anger management. Okay, so this is how you train yourself to not get angry anymore with her, but not going to the heart of why is he so angry. And so it doesn't come off as if you're going there for genuine counseling, to understand what I'm saying, or healing. It's like you're being there to be punished because you hit your wife or you hit whomever, and the court is sending you there. And I've always had a problem with when I look at it, I see the Women's Coalition as a place to help. I see the Men's Coalition as a place for you to be punished. For me, that's how I look at it. And so looking at the play and seeing the discussion that they had, the men had, even when it started out, it was more to get them to accept that they're a batterer. Okay. I get that. But I, at least coming to the end of the play, I don't know what happened through. I can remember we skipped ahead.
Right.
But you can tell that they had worked in their minds, especially the scene with the young man who was married to Saida's Crucian character,
Right.
where he
Estrella.
kind of realized, you know, for him, Edmund, not Edmund, Edmund was Michelle's husband.
No. It was Edmund. It was
Edmund?
Edmund.
Edna was Australia's.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know
When
what I mean?
I know, right? Okay, okay. Wait a minute. Let me stop. When they when he realized and accepted for himself and what his pain was, then in my view, I looked at it and said, okay, well, this is a person that may very well be different when he comes out. But I never, in my real world, I don't get that that's what happens when men go to men's coalition, because there's so much of a recidivism rate with them, and to me that means that they haven't gotten to the root of why they're doing what they're doing. But
I don't fully know, and I can't speak for the men's coalition, but any kind of healing, for me, you have to talk about healing and transformation, and it cannot be punitive. So if they're going to be punished, if they're going to figure out how not to be angry without looking at the root of the anger, then there is a flaw in that scenario, and that needs to be amended. Because real healing can only come about when each person explore, why am I beaten, why am I submitting myself to being beaten. You got to figure that out, and then you can really transform and be something else.
yes.
But in the absence of that, then that doesn't happen.
But if you think about the Women's Coalition and the view, if we spoke about healing through the Women's Coalition. And it's not just healing for women, it's healing for women and families, women, children, and families. It's also an organization that empower families. And that, I think, at times is missing from the Men's Coalition. We don't see that whole role of empowering men. And 'cause some of these men may feel helpless in this situation and they end up being battered. And even look at the programming. You see, the Women's Coalition is all about, they do a lot of programming outside of just focusing on the victim, which again supports their mission. Beyond just knowing that the Men's Coalition exists, you don't see no external programming. It just exists, and you're right. So maybe that should be a commitment, maybe of the Women's Coalition, Adisa, to really get the Men's Coalition, not just to be something that's penal in nature, something that's about corrective behavior and now rehabilitation, but it's also an organization that empowers men and families and maybe has a men's perspective of how they're going to do that, because there are many different factors that impact.
well, it
abuse
seems that we're
in
going to have to
the
invite them back.
household.
Last season, we had the Women's Coalition on the show to talk about, and someone from the Men's Coalition, to talk about these very same issues, and we discussed that as well. And I think we may have to bring them back to talk a little bit more, because like I said, I just think it's, as you said, the Women's Coalition working with women and families. I don't know enough about their counseling programs to know whether when they talk about women and families, if they mean including the man that's battering.
But
To see if that, so that the whole family can be
I agree
healed.
with both Clint and Adisa in terms of they never touch to the root, and in my opinion, a lot of the times to the root got to do with the plantation mentality. You got to take that aspect into consideration as well as what men went through during that period. You understand, and why we could be so aggressive or come up as so aggressive, especially in doing wrong. A lot of times, it would be some kind of duty or some kind of something you fell short in doing, and then you will be challenged on it as a man or as a role in the family. And because of what you have in your mind regarding what a man's supposed to be, based on what you've learned from generation to generation, you may react to that. And it may be anger may be the emotion that comes out of it, and you just react. Because we all know, no pun intended, how a woman could be kind of like in your ear, especially if her needs are not being met. And sometimes
I think
rightfully so.
Stefan says that
And
in
he
the
does
play.
say that, yes.
Stefan says that in the play. But I just want to underscore the point you're making, and that maybe some pressure should be brought to bear, because the Men's Coalition should in fact do the same thing for the men what the Women's Coalition
Right.
does.
Absolutely.
yes,
Absolutely.
And if it's not doing that, then it's shortchanging, and it's in fact it's counterproductive to their
Absolutely.
objective.
Absolutely.
yes, and I brought in by saying not just do for the men, but do for the community, like what the Women Coalition does for the community.
Absolutely.
But
Let's take a quick break,
Okay.
and we'll be back in a moment some more with Opal, Palmer, Adisa. Back in a moment. Good evening and welcome back to VI Voices. We're here with us Opal Palma Adisa, who is a local poet and playwright, and she wrote the play Out of Control, a play that deals with the issues regarding domestic violence. And so this is her first time at VI Voices, and we're so happy that you are here.
Thank you so
and as we're
much.
having this very spirited discussion on that issue, before we went on break, you were going to ask her.
No, I was going to ask about the statistics. You mentioned about the statistics from California, from this rather affluent town. What about the local statistics? Because one thing, economic woes are economics at times, socioeconomic status does impact domestic violence and strife, the lack of strife in a household. What are the numbers over the maybe last couple of years in the territory? Are they down?
I didn't get the numbers for, well, I got some of the numbers for this year in terms of restraining orders. And one of the interesting things is that more men have filed restraining order this year than in the past, in the previous 2 years. So
And you want to know why?
why?
You want to know why? Because they know they can.
Okay.
Men weren't doing it because they viewed restraining orders at family court as something that women do and that they would never get any result. And so why even go? What's been happening is that our Supreme Court has ruled that you're entitled to a lawyer even in a restraining order case. So the men now are coming with lawyers. And so they're now having a much more balanced hearing, and women are now getting restraining orders placed against them. And so that's one of the reasons why you're probably seeing a lot more.
So for
of it happening.
February and March, there were more men who filed restraining orders locally than in the previous.
Interesting.
So I was really surprised about that. The figures in terms of the amount of people that the Women's Coalition serve has not increased that drastically. I think last year, if my figures, it was about 1,900, and the figures aren't in for this year, but for last year and the year before, the figures are like 20 different in terms of, there's not a significant increase. But that might change this year because of the number of restraining order. I forget the name of the woman who deals with restraining order at the court, and there are more restraining orders being, what is the word I'm looking for?
Sought?
Well, they've not necessarily been granted, but thus far there were more restraining order that were being,
Another granted.
yes.
But God finish and I'll ask.
And so the figures might change this year in terms of whether or not there is an increase. And you're right that during economic, difficulties or challenges which St. Croix is experiencing, then domestic violence tends to be higher. But that's kind of, I think that's kind of skewed because we tend to think that. And another thing that happens is that a lot of rich people don't necessarily report
Right,
it because
right.
they could go off to some little fancy place and he buys her
And
a
he'll-
diamond
Yeah.
or takes her on a trip, and so and many women in that situation don't want to lose the lifestyle that they're accustomed to, so they kind of take it. So it might seem like in the lower class or in the working class it's higher, when in fact it might not be.
And that's where I'm gonna get at, because in terms of women, you use the numbers from the Women's Coalition. There may definitely be incidences of abuse, but some people may not go to the Women's Coalition seeking
Exactly.
their assistance, whether they're affluent, working class, or whatnot. They just don't want that stigma to be
Exactly.
affixed to them.
Right.
So-
Especially in such a small
So a community,
Right.
and we have heard stories, and we have known victims who have gone for years
Yeah.
silently at the hands of the abuser, and we just don't know it until a tragedy happened, or
Exactly.
until they retaliate, or some incident took place that they could not avoid
Right.
it being in the
It is
public eye.
estimated, and I had spoken to the Women's Coalition about that in terms of what would be an accurate figure, and they think at least 25%, and it might be higher, of the cases across ethnicity are not reported.
Correct, but we talk about heterosexual relationships, but what about in gay relationships?
Well,
where
I
those
was really
relationships are more
surprised.
taboo?
I was really surprised at the incidence of violence. 4 out of 7 gay men, and these are not local figures because they didn't have the local figures here. These are national figures. Are in abusive relationships.
Wow.
Yeah, I was shocked.
That's high.
That is
Very
high. That is
So,
high.
and,
Very
and see,
high.
and those are the things that we are we are traditional community, and those
Wouldn't
are
that
some
be
things.
expected though in gay
Well, you know,
relationships? No, I mean
in
not
my
thinking about it
mind,
because of the
in my
nature of a
mind,
man.
yes, in my mind, part of that has to do with they are already operating in a hostile environment, and so that hostility,
Right.
you know,
And it's
and
okay to fight someone that's the same of your gender.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
You don't
Right.
view it as different.
Right.
Correct.
right. So I
Correct.
think
And some are
there's that.
angry
So you see that in both.
to begin with. I mean,
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. I'll respect that. But are you gonna? So do you see that in both gay men relationships and lesbian relationships, or just in?
Well, I think there's also, I have a few lesbian friends, and they tell me that a lot of that stuff happens too. The statistics speak specifically to gay men. But I think, again, it also it happens in all relationships.
Yes,
You know,
correct.
relationships are about control and about, you know, equity and inequity. And so, listen,
If you ain't giving me,
yeah.
If you think about it, I mean, even on an individual level, in harnessing the forces within an individual, you train. If the whole purpose of you is to become one with yourself or know yourself, imagine doing it with somebody else.
Right.
You understand? And the aggression and all the war that are going to create.
And we don't have any good models for relationships
That too.
anyway. You know, seriously. You know, I say to people, and I'm not being facetious at all, because people say, oh, all of this new violence. And I say to them, what new violence? The Caribbean was wrought in violence.
Okay.
We came and not we, but, you know, they
we
came
know,
and they,
right.
and
They
they
came, they
annihilated
conquered, yes.
the people. We were brought here illegally. We were beaten for years. My God.
Dehumanized.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to know that the violence that you're seeing now is a manifestation of
That's
all
right.
of those years of build up.
That's right.
So we don't have positive models of how to live in a society that's just and equal for just in general, much less
Correct.
for men and women.
Correct.
Or for people who are in intimate relationships.
but you know, I don't want to move away from the importance of this debate. But you know, you just hit our whole societal makeup in how you responded to that question. Because truly, how we operate with each other, whether it's in these relationships or just men to men,
Right.
women to men,
Right.
or as a community,
Right.
it's based on these values that we
Were
not were
removed.
taught.
Right, were
We
removed.
mirrored from
Exactly.
from the society we are trying to reflect.
That's right.
And that has continued up to today. So our political structures again continue to reflect all
Yes.
of those things.
I
I
agree.
totally
Right.
agree.
Correct.
with
And
you.
the play doesn't look at just the ordinary relationship between people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, men to men, woman to woman.
Right.
And there's a lot of, maybe it's not physical fighting, but there's a lot of emotional abuse and mudslinging that goes on just in general.
And you know, I'm glad you said that, because one of the things also important, people, when we talk about domestic abuse, we automatically zero in on the physical aspect of it. When, in my view, the physical aspect, we get to see the outside what it is. But in my view, I think the emotional
And
domestic
verbal.
abuse
Verbal too.
is the one that is most damaging.
That crippling. Absolutely.
Because you can't see the bruises, because it's internal, and that person is feeling it. And I think, and you touched on that. I think in your character, with your wife,
I think in my
that-
character more than the rest.
Yeah,
Bob
yeah.
wasn't
Yeah,
necessarily
yeah.
physically abusive per se. He was more
Emotionally
and
manipulative.
Now, which reminds me, I want to say this before I forget, not to give you more work, right?
Okay.
But I think that you need to do a play that deals with the years for Bert. What's your wife's name again?
Ganisa.
Ganisa.
And Denisa. Like, what happened between the college time when she finally says yes and the time when they moved home 10 years later? Like, that little part in there, because I really like Bert when I first met him.
I do too.
I really liked him. I was like, oh my
Most
God, he
people
really
do.
loves her. He's so sweet. And then,
Because
But he still
but he
loves
still,
her.
but keep in mind, you know, but the character I play, but still is in love with his wife, and
yeah,
Just
but you
that-
didn't come off like, you were like really sweet that everybody would want a Bert when the play first started. And then afterwards, when they moved to St. Croix, the time when you said, pack your bags, we go back to St. Croix now. I was like, okay, Bert. That was a little much. And then we got back to St. Croix. And I was like, what happened to Bert? How did Bert get like that? Was
Over the
he
years,
always
I think
like that?
well,
Did something happen to him?
I'm not sure, but in my opinion, I think it was something that gradually became about because of the fact that he was a sole provider. Keep in mind that Bert was the only one working.
Which is why Opal has some work.
Right.
Because I want you, I'm serious, Opal. I would so love for you to do something about what happened between him and his wife. And how he got to the point that he was. But you're right. He wasn't really verbally abusive. I mean, not verbally. He really wasn't physically abusive to her.
He was mostly
verbally and emotionally
Yeah.
abusive to her. But he didn't come off like that in the beginning. So it's either he was always like that and it was kind of suppressed, or something happened after they got
Well,
married.
Well, if you
that
remember
caused
the
it.
first line, even before they hooked up, where he says, she left me and didn't write, and I wanted her to feel
Some
my
of the
pain.
pain.
Yes.
Yes.
So there were hints of it, and that's partly what I said in the play. That oftentimes, we can point fingers, but we get hints.
Yeah, you miss them. Right?
Yeah, you missed it,
yeah,
or you
on
overlooked
purpose, or
them
you
because
overlooked them.
the
Bert
endorphins are
himself
floating
may have been a
around.
victim of it in terms of his parents seeing it in the formative years coming up. And this is just my opinion. This is the direction you were going with Bart, because I think Bart himself was a victim. You know what I'm saying? And that's the way that he had insecurities. Bart had insecurities, and that's the only manner in which he knew how to deal with them.
Right.
Was to verbally lash out or whatever.
So you hearing?
I'm hearing.
Because I'm feeling a really good play with Bert and Adisa. I really, really am. I'm already excited about it. I don't know if it's in your brain right now, but
well, you put it in my brain. What my brain
I'm
will do
really
with it.
excited about feeling like what that would be like.
All the other couples I believe Bart and Ganesa seem the more stable, to tell you the truth, or the more in love.
Yes.
I think so, because we had the one
And
with
that
the
was
Middle
my
Eastern couple.
intention, right?
They were arranged, so you could understand why they could have been like, I don't know, because they didn't even know each other at all.
Right,
And then you had Saida's character with her husband, which in my view, I shouldn't be laughing at what she was doing, but she was so funny in some of the words that she would say, but you understood her, because that's exactly how some women in our Caribbean would react to it. And then of course Stefan was very different, because you got to really see an emotionally abused man.
Sweetheart.
But for me, Bert and Denisa were the most complex of all of them.
I agree.
And well, let me ask you this: how did you pick them? Were you the casting person? Like, how did you?
That's a good question.
Yeah, how did you pick the cast?
We won't talk about that. No. I have worked with Lisa for 3 years, and I know that she's a stellar actor. And so when I showed her the play, initially when we got together, I said, what line do you want to read for? And I told her that I had that in mind for her. And when she read it, she said yes. And so I felt she was perfectly cast. Now, I must admit we had trouble finding a Bert.
Really?
Listen, I can't tell you, and I won't go through names. How many men said they didn't want to play this because they didn't want the community to see them that way? And I said to them, this is a play. If you're not a batterer, the community isn't going to see you as a batterer.
Exactly.
But several men turned me down because they said they didn't want to play that role. So
Well, I'm glad they did, because this Bert was the best Bert.
I agree.
And convincing.
And convincing.
And convincing. Well,
Thank you, sir.
yeah. How did you feel? Let's ask him. How did you feel
Please,
playing
yes.
playing the role of Bert?
I mean, it was, again, this was my first time doing something like this. And initially, I can tell you the history. One of the cast members and I have been friends for like maybe 30 years or so. And in being friends, you speak about a lot of different things. And I told this member that, yes, okay, and this was years ago, maybe 10, 12 years ago. I was like, oh yeah, I'm interested in doing a play. I would do a play. Like, I don't have anything against it. And I've always I'm like a big fan of movies and the arts on a whole. So I told this member that, yeah, I would do it. And just out of the blue, they were like, well, we have a reading. Maybe you could come and see the script. You might be interested in it. And that's how it happened. And I just went and I read. I didn't know that I was going to be bought. I just went just to see the script, just to read the script. And the next thing I knew is like, practice is tomorrow. It's like,
when I saw him, I knew that he could do the role, and he seemed really perfect for it, and he really rose to the occasion.
And don't ask me how she know that, because again, this was my first time. I ain't had no formal lessons.
Hey, I have instincts.
Well, your instincts were dead on.
But let me offer this. The Caribbean society, our society is a very complex society. And whenever we can use the arts to tell our story and at least put it out there so we can understand the complexities of being Caribbean, then I think we touch audiences. I remember way back in the 90s, and you may think it's not a good a movie that provides a great description of what society is. You ever watch the movie Lunatic?
Yes.
I love that movie.
It dealt with so many issues within a Caribbean society in that time frame. Men and women issue, the racial issue, the social issue, the Bukra issue. A lot of issues were discussed in that film. Even the socio-economic issue and educational attainment issue. All of that were discussed. And when we can actually put that behind in a movie, the arts, I think we can then start to break down walls and give people a voice and really can say, okay, and identify, okay, this is what I'm going through in my life. I have a voice. I can actually start to reach out, and maybe you can actually have them seek out counseling or seek out support to address some of the issues that they're really facing.
But like what Emina and I were talking about earlier in terms of the Virgin Islands, well, not necessarily Virgin. I could speak for St. Croix. Historically speaking, have been like active in different in theater, in plays and what's not. I can remember from a child attending different plays and what's not coming up. So
But
I
were
think
many of those plays based locally, or were they imported?
as a child I wouldn't know that. But
No,
I mean,
I-
I could think about one or two of them that were it had to do with Caribbean roots.
It depends on where the play was located, where you would go see the play.
Yeah, true.
Because if you were going to Courtyard Players, if you were going to sometimes like the Inn, if you were going down to the Fort, you got a lot of Sarah and Addie. You got a lot of these other type of local plays, and people are part of the local plays. You went to Island Center, you got a lot of imported plays, but they had seasons and all these different things happening. And so you got a broad spectrum. With CCT coming in, they were good about doing a good mix of local plays and imported plays. And so, but in schools, we were required, remember in elementary school, every class had to have a play. I mean, you had to do a play for the school. And it often involved us doing some reenactment from Clear the Road or some whatever. But we always did that. And somewhere along the line, they removed the arts from schools. And it just kind of phased out. But I've always felt that, we have a lot of angry young people.
Right.
And if they can channel that anger in the arts, it will kind of reduce a lot of the stuff, the violence that we see going on today.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and this is why having a youth forum where young people between the ages of 15 to 21 can write their own plays and perform it on an annual basis, I think would really help tremendously in terms of, because I think your point is an important point that I want to underscore. The arts allow us to see that we are not the only ones who are feeling this or struggling with this, and it gives us an opening.
Correct. And I have 3 children, and one of the things I encourage them to do, not even encourage them, they don't have an option. They're going to do music throughout school. My son, who's 15, he has this affinity for acting, and it's in his nature. It seems like the arts, the music is his intelligence. So I allow him to explore it, because it allows him to have a voice and to express himself, because teenage years are some tough years.
Yes.
So he gets to, and I think we need to encourage these things in our young people. Explore it.
And challenge
Exploration
that.
is
Channel.
necessary.
Absolutely.
Don't let them just be pigeonholed in sports. Don't let them be pigeonholed in just academics.
Right.
Explore the world. Start with the different subject areas, music, art. Let them feel the world around. I think they're going to be better persons.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
Totally
But Opal,
agree.
as we close out, let us know where, if people want to get in contact with you or see some of your work, where they can find you.
Well, my books are available on Amazon.com, so there I'm on Facebook. And you could just Google my name, Opal Palmer Adisa. .com, and you'll find a lot of things about me. So please do, and please continue to support the arts in St. Croix. Talk to your senators and all your people, and make sure that they budget money for the arts, because there are lots of wonderful musicians and artists here, and they definitely need support.
And what I want our audience to do as well is, if you can contact your senators, contact your congress people, contact other local organizations, and tell them that they need to get in contact with Opal and see what they can do to contribute to her cause and to this specific play, Out of Control. It is an awesome play. It touches on, as you said, it reflects, and also we can see what's happening around us. And it's not just a play about Caribbean people. It's really a play that encompasses the issues of domestic violence amongst all peoples, all races, all genders, all ethnicities. And this is a play that needs to be seen.
Yes,
It was a one-time
absolutely.
show. I mean, you
Right.
saw one event, and if you missed it, you kind of missed it. But it's something that we really need to have more of. And so I'm asking here that you call who you can and let them get in contact with Opal and see what they can contribute to her organization, that they can bring this play back for some more evenings, and so that we can all see what it is, and hopefully we can also have sufficient funding for more plays that you'll be able to do.
Thank
And
you.
so try your best to come out and do that. And as you know, here at VI Voices, we continue to want all of your voices to be heard, because it is extremely important that it be heard. It's extremely important that you be educated and informed on all of the issues that are plaguing us in our community and in our society today. And we will continue in the next coming weeks as we go back into our election cycle to bring some more information with you and more information to you, so that you may make an educated and informed decision in 2014. Until next time, good night, everybody.